And so we're in another one of these situations where it's like, well, you could work with us and we'll do it for you relatively cheaply. Or you could have create a pretty deck and that'll cost you 2.1 million, but nobody will question it.
There was a time, I think, when that was true. 'Cause I think there's, the bloom is off, probably off the rose, and people are a little bit more skeptical. And that's not to say that doesn't have good strategic theories and stuff like that. But when it comes down to where the rubber meets the road, I don't know.
Any of the big think tank
Hmm.
consulting houses are there to give you a big idea, right? They're giving you roadmaps, they're giving you things that you can act against. But it does seem sometimes like they don't actually have the experience doing it. They're just the
Yeah.
ones who have the IP, and they're sharing the IP.
Yeah. And a part of it, I think, is discernment on the part of the client, right? It's like, what exactly am I paying for here? And could I
Hmm.
get the same thing for half the price if I really understood it and could was confident in evaluating value for money? Yeah.
You get what you pay for, and you ignore what you didn't pay enough for.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah. So, okay. So,
Well, no, if you're paying a consultant hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars, I'm not even going to say how many,
per
an
hour,
hour for their
Hmm.
opinion, and you're paying one of us an amount
couple.
less than that,
Substantially less.
and you're paying a off the street scrum master even less than that,
Hmm.
right? You can certainly afford to ignore the third guy, right? The off
Even
the
if they're
street guy,
giving you the same advice.
right? You can certainly afford to just do your own thing because their opinion is this big, and then the other guy is the 1,200-pound gorilla, and his opinion cost you a ton of money. So maybe you better avail yourself of that opinion,
Hmm.
or you're going to look really dumb.
Exactly. You're going to look dumb unless you're able to break down exactly what the contents of what you're getting and defend the fact that no, it's the same thing. It's a different label, but it does the same thing, right? That's kind of
Yeah.
what I'm getting at.
And then there's us. And if you're if you're closer to the lower end of the scale or closer to the upper end of the scale, it's what's their tolerance for ignoring your advice.
Yeah.
Because it all comes down to that. At one point or another, they're always ignoring their other people's advice. They dismiss it as coming from the outside. They dismiss it as, you don't know us. I know you've seen a million things, but you don't know us. You haven't seen us. You don't know the context. And what their lack of context can't show them is the
The
echoes
bigger
of,
picture where everybody looks like that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And we would, when we were all at that one client, the one thing that was constant when we would go from group to group to group was they would start with the same preamble. I know you've worked with a lot of teams here, but we're different.
Yeah.
Every single one of them started with that statement. Every person in a one-on-one I worked with started with that statement. I know you've seen some stuff, but we're different.
And in a way, they were right though, because each team does have its own character and microculture, but in
Yes.
the larger macro, we understood how the organization worked, regardless of.
Yeah.
The teams weren't different in a way that impacted how they deliver value, essentially, right?
It impacted the work they did, but it didn't impact the culture in which they operated. The culture in which they operated was the culture of the company.
I guess what I'm saying is the same principles applied to all of them, even though
Yeah.
there were differences,
Oh, yeah.
right?
There's
And with
always differences. They're still individuals. Everybody is
Mhm,
an
mhm.
individual, and
yeah,
different dynamics within teams and within products and product lines and value streams. They'll all play a part in shaping the landscape that you're operating in.
yeah.
But fundamentally, there was a commonality among all that stuff. And the things that we were mostly concerned with were the parts in the commonality.
So the problem is when people would ultimately implicitly say, "Yeah, but the principles don't apply to us because we're
Yeah.
different." That's
Yeah.
yeah.
which means I don't want to change.
We're going to embrace a framework,
Yeah,
right?
I don't want to break stuff down into little pieces. I don't want to get feedback quickly. I don't want to measure value or
I
outcomes.
can't see why all my guys sitting around for an hour at the end of every sprint is a good use of their time.
Yeah.
I swear to God, I still get that one constantly. It's like, well, if they get through everything they need, it can be shorter than an hour.
Totally.
But if they're finding it useful, they may be very happy to have that whole hour.
Yeah, and the principles is they need feedback from their stakeholders or their customers, and they need to constantly improve. So if you find a better way to do that in 3 minutes every day, let's do that.
Yeah.
But the alternative is not just don't do it in any form. That's a loser. So, yeah.
Do you think then that it was less about I don't want to spend the time and more about continuous improvement? It really becomes lip service. Organizations talk about continuous improvement. Yeah, we want to continuously improve, but the reality is they don't want to spend the time and do the things that all the behaviors and everything that lead to continuous improvement on a continual basis.
Yeah, it's funny because, sometimes you see people or groups who are super focused on paying attention to measuring, driving to results, trying to objective numerical results in certain areas that they care about. But when it comes to attending to the system and using that same level of precision and measurement, about are we continuous improvement is a great example, right? Like in what ways are we better this week or this month? It gets fuzzy, right? Again, I think because they don't really see the benefit to it and how it
Hmm.
applies to them and what the consequences are of not doing it. Because it's easy to say, "Oh yeah, we're way better than we," and that's true. I mean, people are learning; they're doing stuff differently. But is there a systematic way of like? I mean, you report your profits in a way that are objective and verifiable, right? And your processes, like we know that this product is effective, right, and safe based on certain objective things. It's like, well, I mean, your system is also deserves that level of the way that you create those results also deserves the same level of care and scrutiny. Otherwise, maybe it's not getting better. Maybe your
Yeah.
competitors are getting better faster than you are. What does that mean?
See, that's the thing is I don't think the continuous improvement driver is present in a lot of these situations, these environments.
Yeah,
That
it's a part of the
it's not
system
a
that's
it's
missing.
not a get better, it's a get done.
Right.
Right.
All the focus, all the energy is around what we need to get this done.
Right.
And that driver is because and I'm not talking about any one place, but
Hmm.
they are laser focused on shoving as much things through the pipe as they can, packing the pipe as tight as they can, because that's how you get stuff to the other side. And
Yep.
they don't modulate that to the point they don't want to hear. Sometimes you got to slow down to go faster. Sometimes you have to smooth things out to be efficient. They don't want to hear efficiency. They don't want to spend the time getting there because there's no guarantee on that. From their perspective, the only guarantee to get stuff done is to keep hammering on working.
Yeah. Agreed.
So,
Yeah.
and so how do you shift that conversation? How do you chip away at that certainty that the only path to getting this stuff done is to
Hmm.
continually pack the pipe and put pressure on everyone?
Honestly, I think um, it's baked into the culture, and so um, and we know how long it takes to shift culture. Um, Even if you're successful, even if you are making steady improvements in shifting your culture, it still takes a long time. The larger the organization, the longer it takes, just because you've got to first unlearn a lot of the old behaviors and patterns that were not conducive to continuous improvement and get them shifting and providing space. I think, remember when we talked to Pia, she kind of talked about
Mm.
providing space. So it's not just a matter of um, telling people, okay, we're going in a different direction or we're going in this direction. It's providing them the space to learn and adapt. But to your point, Mike, if it's just all about shove as much stuff into the pipe, and that's the culture that we've always had for
Mhm.
10, 20, 30, 40, 50 or more years, to change an organization, and the larger the organization, the harder it is, the longer it's going to take in order to change those behaviors and patterns. But I do think, is it possible? Yeah, I think it's possible, but geez.
Yeah, it comes back
It's
to leadership and what's leadership about and what's the scope of leadership. And I think we're saying that's part of the scope of leadership is to say, you don't just run the system, you're responsible for
Mhm.
evolving the system and figuring out where you want the system to be and how
yeah,
do you get
see,
there.
that's the difference. That's the concern right there. Is I think that the leadership's goal is not to improve the system; it's to maintain the system.
Sometimes, but maybe the question is that good leadership?
Well,
Or is it
in
sufficient in
in
all?
your larger understanding of leadership, maybe not.
Yeah.
But in their understanding that they've evolved into or that they've grown
Mm.
into, that is the slot, that is the role that they have been elevated into. Is your job is to keep the system running.
Yeah. Have you guys heard about a guy named Bob Emiliani? Does
Oh
that
yeah.
name ring a
Hmm.
bell?
Hmm.
No.
He has written a number of books. I think he comes out of the lean
Hmm.
manufacturing. But I think the thing I remember us on some call with him, and his theme was like leaders are not doing this, and I don't know why. I've been working for 30 years,
Yeah.
Bob. I think as be a fair paraphrase, like, he, yeah, maybe we should talk
Okay.
to him at some point.
So you can see how it can happen
Has
because,
happened.
well, of course, no, you can see
Continues.
how you can get into the state where you don't have an
Yeah.
improvement culture,
Oh
right?
yeah. Oh yeah.
Because at some point you may have had a leader who was trying to improve things and they got to a point that they liked the way it went, right?
Hmm.
And then that started being, this is how we do things around here. This is the way that I want to see things done. And once they got to a point where in their head they had achieved the goal of efficiency, they stopped
Hmm.
or they retired or they went and got elevated to something else. But the people who then grew and came up into that role from below were
Right.
indoctrinated into that's the way we do things around here, right?
Yeah.
They got up there and they maintained the flight. That was the point, is keep it steady, do what he would
Yeah.
have done, do what they would have done, whatever. And it just it perpetuates itself. It gets to the point where this is the way we do things. Then we build, maybe somebody tried to go outside the lines, they tried to color outside the lines and maybe it didn't work, and then somebody came and slapped them down for violating the way we do things. When we came in with ways that shook that up and deliberately and maybe subversively took power away from those people. In order to work, you have to give the teams the autonomy to make the decisions themselves and try new things, to innovate within their own space, to help try and get better at what they do. And we left these guys who by this time are a friend of a friend of a friend, just maintaining this course, and they realized the thing I think of myself as doing, I can no longer do.
Yeah.
And they fight
Yeah.
back. They try and hold back. The concept of growth and innovation and entrepreneurship within an organization is, especially the older the organization is, it's not a muscle that they know how to use anymore in the
Yeah.
trenches.
Yeah. So I wonder then, as I'm listening to what you're saying, is there a way to utilize that entrenchment, what ends up being entrenchment, to shift the culture. In other words, if you've got a culture, let's say you were a new company and you
Mm-hmm.
started out with a culture of continual improvement. This is what we do. We make space, we continually improve and innovate. There's room for, I'll call it failure, whatever you want to call it, experimentation. If that is embedded, and this kind of gets to what Jim Benson was talking about a couple of weeks ago, if it becomes part of the fabric of the organization, then it is inured against a new leader coming in because, well, this is how we work. And we continually, whatever, Big Bob says, yeah, you're the new CFO or COO or whatever. This is how we work, though. We
Mm-hmm.
continuously improve, blah, 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 blah. And if they can continually show that, yes, this gets better results, then it's kind of protected against the new guy coming in and, trying to install a different regime.
Well, it can be. What's funny is, when I do the IC Agile training, we do a lot of scenarios, and all the scenarios are allegedly based off real life situations. And so they'll names redacted, they'll explain a situation. A global company with distribution or production centers all over the world, each one of those runs almost like a family unit. They all have their own way of doing things. They all do, and their client, their employee satisfaction is through the roof, and all this other stuff. And they get a new CEO, and the new CEO looks in there and looks at all the numbers and says, well, I can reduce costs by centralizing some of these things. Like everyone's got their own IT department. Everyone's got their own this. I'm going to centralize all this stuff.
I'm good at efficiency.
Right.
Yes, the efficiency play. Yep.
Yeah. And you're supposed to, and then they say, now as an Agile coach, what's your play here? And to your point, you can, or to take your scenario where you say that person couldn't come in, and they would never do that. They wouldn't break a well-functioning machine. And the first part of that exercise is to have the coaches in the class recognize the fact that it already was working. Right.
Yeah, there's a trade-off there that is being implicitly invoked, like the trade-off between efficiency and. So take a look at Boeing. But Boeing was an engineering company, right? Like, my understanding is that engineers ran the company, and the focus was on making an awesome product.
30 years ago, yep.
Yeah, the guys from McDonnell Douglas came in and took over, and they were more interested in financial results. I mean, they moved the head of the company away from where the planes were built in the Northwest to Chicago, and they focused on money, basically. Not to be reductive, and what happened? Quality of the product went down, and all the stuff that are happening now, right? That trade-off gets, So maybe the role of the coach is to say, hey, there's a trade-off that you're making here. Do you understand all the implications of what's going to happen? Yeah, you'll be able to save more money and end up with more revenue at the end. Is that the only effect of this, right? Have you considered all the second and third order consequences of that?
Yeah. You save money this year.
Yeah. If you're at Boeing today.
But next year, as the stresses start going across the product and it starts getting, showing fatigue, what's the cost of repairing that fatigue later?
That's sort of a metaphor, sort of a literal.
Is it going to fail spectacularly one day? Something's going to
Are you going to have to be found criminally liable and pay $1 billion fine? Yeah, I think if you're the head, the people at Boeing would have liked to maybe go back and reconsider some of those decisions.
When you say the people of Boeing, that's a large organization.
I don't know that you could go that broad.
Some of them. Well, the people who made the decisions, I guess, who took us down this path instead of this path.
See, right. Okay, go ahead, Jeff.
I think part of the problem, and they've been making changes recently at the top, but I don't think they've made all the right changes. And I think what's conveniently forgotten, or at least lost in all the chatter of, oh, we got a new CEO, is that the board is the real boss. Let's face it.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I've seen a whole lot of change in the board. I think there were maybe a few changes. And so this is all to say, CEOs, Muhlenberg, he was acting in concert
Right.
with what the board wanted and desired.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I mean, the CEO basically works for the board.
He couldn't have done this by himself.
No. Exactly. So where is the board? And so, and I think in large organizations, that's really where you find some of these, what is the term you used to use? Antibodies to the drive that we want for continuous improvement, blah, blah, blah. If the board says more, stuff that pipe, more,
Yeah.
then the CEO and
do more of the thing that gets us more of the stuff.
yes.
Do more of that thing, whatever that thing is. We want more stuff.
Ultimately, it's an unbalanced approach, right? Like you can say, get rid of all waste, make everything as efficient as it possibly could be. Like make your supply lines, your supply chain as efficient as possible,
Well, we
right?
saw how that worked.
But then you realize it's fragile.
Right. We talked with Graham Scott though, and you take that removing waste to an extreme, and you actually make it less efficient. You now introduced wait times into your flow. So the bookkeeper looks at it and says, I've got people sitting idle. That's wasted dollars. Right. But they don't look at the constraint in the system that is fully operational and continually kicking stuff out. And that means you've got efficiency. That's your efficiency.
Yeah. The benefit to the system of allowing some people to be idle at some times. Right. Yeah. So maybe this is really the point of leadership is to take the input from the lawyers, take the input from the accountants, take the input from the operations people and everybody who's got their relatively narrow focus, not to disparage them, but they know their area best, right? And they have strong opinions about when this needs to happen from that perspective. And the role of leadership is to take all those inputs in and say, okay, for the benefit of the entire system, I'm going to have to weigh all these interests, right? And say, here is when you take all that into account, the wisest path is not any one of them. It's a sort of, it's an analysis and a synthesis based on that.
And
how do I maximize?
Do we train them for that?
It seems hard, but like,
right. Because we're not there. I mean, we come in after the fact, after they're already installed, right? They're already in there with whatever habits or capabilities that they have, the leaders in the organization.
But I think all we can do is make these dynamics explicit and then say, here are the levers to play with, right? We're not going to tell you which ones to pull and when and how much, but understand there's an effect to this. And if you pull the financial efficiency thing all the way back, your engineering, your safety, your other stuff, that lever is probably going to have to move too. And if you're not managing that, you're on the hook for it either way. Yeah. So just understand that's happening.
Look at the global dynamic, how things have changed though. How many organizations, they used to have their own departments full of people and all this other stuff. And then as they pulled that financial lever, they went for lower cost solutions.
Yeah.
Right. Solutions they could no longer perfectly control.
Yeah. They got some extra dollars and they lost some stuff. And then what did they
lose? They lost know-how. They lost
in some cases.
What's that?
Lives in some cases. Like you have to be super careful about this.
Yeah.
Well, that's why safety is supposed to be number one and not just a tagline or something like that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are we still talking about that one? I thought we had left the metaphor by now. All right. So, yeah. I mean, we don't, I think that part of the problem we have is that we've got these people who are basically maintaining status quo because that's what they've always seen. That's what they know. They don't think of it from a stand. And then someone comes to them with a mandate that says, someone in the board has declared we need to save more. We need to produce more profit.
Yeah.
So how are we going to produce profit? Cost accounting, reduce expenses. So how do we reduce expenses? Now look through your world and find me some dollars,
Yeah.
right? They never come in and say, produce me more product, make more sales. They come back and say, reduce my cost.
You know who doesn't tend to do this as much? Founders.
Right.
Right. So there's an interesting sort of pattern here where the founder, the principle, the reason the thing exists in the first place is more, but then what tends to happen, I think what you're saying, Mike, is that there's a life cycle to these things, right? The founder passes, and I've heard this described as the PMC, the professional managerial class, the people who come in and they think their job is to maintain the thing, right? And they don't have the same, I don't know if you call it alpha, but like appreciation of first order sort of dynamics and the willingness to make these, because it's hard to stand up and be like, no, we're not doing that. We're going to burn $500 billion on this thing because if it works, then it changes everything. And if not, then I'm wrong. Sorry.
Well,
It takes real courage.
So
Yeah.
Simon Sinek, it starts with why. You come back to why does this organization exist? And the shining example in all of his talks was Apple, right? Because Apple still had its founder with them, right? Their founder was still influencing the way everything was done.
Yeah.
Right.
It's such a great example because the founder created the thing and he left and it almost
he was kicked
died.
out.
Right.
Right. But then he came back and the same dynamic returned and now it's what it is.
And then
right?
he left again more permanently.
And I can't get my headphones to reliably connect to my phone. No, I'm not going to buy your car. No, I'm not going to buy your $3,500 virtual reality things. Like, make the fucking weather app work. Anyway, I'm not mad.
Is it time for me to sell my Apple stock?
Here, put your hands up. Go on. Make the balloons go.
I can't. I turned that shit off because it's just, oh God. Yes, another example. Anyway.
So
yeah.
So that's the thing. So you're right. The professional management class. Look, I have successfully maintained another company and cut costs. Your board is asking for the same stuff that board was asking for. I can come and do that for you too.
Mm-hmm. But
right?
why? But begin with why. What's the point of this, right?
Well, they've lost the thread, the principal thread. Why did the company exist in the first place?
Exactly.
Right? What were we jonesed about delivering out into the world?
Our vision is more dollars for us.
Right. The focus changed from delivering a product or a service of high value to customers to shareholders. We got to maximize profit here. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with profit. That's good. But if your focus becomes we want to make more money, then that shifts.
It's the wrong order of operations. If you focus on making an awesome airplane that everybody finds delightful and has no concerns about, there's plenty of money. If you focus on the innovation, you'll always be in an okay place in the market, right?
Yeah.
But the opposite does not work.
No, you banked on your name. You produced crap, and now your name is known.
Right, and so now it's a gamble, though, and so. I think a lot of times there's this perception that, well, I know our shift, or maybe there is not even a recognition of a shift in focus. They really still think that safety, quality, whatever, and this doesn't go specifically to Boeing. This is just everybody.
Yeah.
At some point, even though the original intent and focus was high quality, everybody will still say, well, we're all about quality. Quality is number one. But in fact, the behaviors that belie that say that, no, actually, profit is number one.
In building their name, in becoming the Boeing, right, in the first place, they had to produce quality. They had to create a reliable product.
Absolutely.
That became recognized as you buy one of those, you've got a good product, right? You can build a business off that. You can build your fleet relying on that product because it's there and it's solid and it's always available. And that was when it was following its true mission, its original mission.
There
But
was
then
real
it
value
became a
being
profit-based
shipped.
thing.
Mhm.
And inertia carried you forward in the market. People continued to buy Boeing because that's what you did, right?
Yep.
And then there might have even been an aspect of nationalism in that. It's like, you are a domestic air carrier, you should have domestic aircraft. You shouldn't be buying Airbuses. You shouldn't be buying things from over there.
Hmm.
Made in America. Get this product. We've got the Boeing. So you go and you get the Boeing, you build your fleet, but somewhere along the line, Boeing stopped being mission driven and started cost cutting.
Yeah.
And maybe cost cutting contributed to, it could be any number of factors. It might not even have been all their fault. It might be the manufacturers of the steel, or it might be the manufacturers of the aluminum or the titanium or whatever they're building them out of.
Yeah. But fundamentally, it's about focus, right? I mean, that's really what leadership comes down to. Like, are we focused on the right thing for the right reason, right? And measuring the right results. And I feel like it comes back to that. Like, either you're thinking first about the airplane and the customers and the passengers, or you're
Yeah.
just not. And it sounds
So-
reductive and easy to say, and it is. But also, I'm not sure that it's wrong.
So let's take this. I accept everything you just said. Totally true.
Mm.
100%. Now take it and apply it to our situation, and take it and apply it to the organizations that you find better benefit or better impact versus the bigger companies.
Mm.
The smaller company, closer to its originator, closer
Yes.
to the they haven't lost their purpose yet.
Still in
So
growth mode.
invoking, let's get focused on the customer. Let's get into continuous improvement. Let's take these models and methods and frameworks that can help reinvigorate that concept.
Driven by
And the
passion
muscle
for
isn't
the
dead yet.
Yeah, they're driven by passion for the product, serving the customer, creating
Yeah.
real value, shipping the thing for real, and thereby, and because that's what invokes the river of dollars. But,
Right.
but that's not why they do it, right? it's
Well-
a happy consequence.
Yes, it's a happy consequence, right? You get a good product, you get good sale, you make money, right?
Yep.
It seems to be like, when I first started noticing this, it was like, you know what, is it even, and we've said this, is it even possible for a publicly traded company to ever be truly agile?
I mean, why would they need to do it? They're swimming in a river of money. Everything's comfortable. Like the risk of doing something real changey.
Yeah.
This feels harder. I mean, if look, man, this is a human thing. It's not even a business thing. It's like, if you can sit there and be comfortable and not rock the boat and have everything you really care about, no, that's a little bit reductive. But like, startups are focused because they have to be. If they don't do the thing, they won't, survive and grow and prosper. But people can. This is people being too comfortable is really bad for human character. Honestly, it demotivates you, right?
Yeah.
In general, I tend to align with what Mike just said, as we've talked about a lot. Large publicly owned companies do struggle with, and not just agile, it's change in general.
Mhm.
But I think, for every generalization, there are exceptions. I'm not sure, but I believe ING, the financial services company over in Denmark or the Netherlands, I can't remember which one. They went through massive change, and it was from the top. You probably know the story. They fired everybody. Everybody had to basically reapply for jobs, and they went through this massive change of culture, behaviors, practices, everything. And that's I'm pretty sure they're publicly owned, and so that's one of those exceptions to the rule. So I would always hesitate to say it's
So the
not.
answer is yes, it is even possible.
It is. I think it is possible. It is possible if you're willing to do what is necessary.
Yeah.
But is it possible if your focus is on the profit as for profit's sake versus
no.
your profit is
No.
an earned benefit
No.
of the product or
No.
service, right?
Maybe it's
And
a
that-
question of like, as a senior leader, what are your incentives in that situation, right?
Right. Okay, so now you're an organization, maybe a middle large organization, not super huge, and you hire coaching. You decide you're going to be going down an agile path for some reason, right? And probably because somebody said, you know, it can be more efficient, or we can get more work done, more done with less, or something. And so it tweaked somebody's, ooh, there's more money there, right? So you bring them in, but you are an organization with a culture of maintaining the status quo and just doing the thing. You have people, your middle is populated by managers who don't know efficiency as a goal. They know cost cutting as a goal.
Yeah.
And you're coming in and you're saying, oh no, we should try this. You should do this. You should push responsibility to the people who know the work, and then try and engage them in the mission and all this other stuff. And we say all these things we say, and they don't have a hunger for that.
Yeah.
Their hunger is, no, we're supposed to do the agile. That's why you're here. You're here to help us do the agile.
I think you have to Simon Sinek them, right? And begin them
Yeah.
with why. Because like I think a lot of times the situation is people think that Agile will make them more efficient, so they can install Agile, and then they need 15% fewer people. Just fire them, keep the money. It
Yeah.
ultimately is about more
And
money.
how much are you going to pay for the guy that's going to help you do that?
Well,
How much do you have to pay? You don't need
Right.
the inspirational coach who's going to get everybody built up on a mission, because you don't want the mission.
Because
you
you're
want
not
the
trying to
outcome.
grow value, you're trying to cut costs ultimately.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
So you're going to bring in the lowest cost resource you have that can teach teams how to work in a scrum, because then you can check the box and say you're doing the agile, and then you could say it's not working and we're going to go back and do the other thing instead.
Yeah, I think if it's
Right.
about the dollars, that's ultimately not an inspiring, empowering, motivating mission, and people can smell that, and that's why that fails.
Yeah. Well, you work for the company where the mission is to earn more money for the shareholder.
What are my
That
other
literally,
options?
I worked at a company where that was literally our mission statement. It was written right there. Our goal is to make money for the shareholder, the owner of the company. That was it.
Yeah, so you'll get compliant energy in that situation, but you won't get committed energy.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm looking for committed energy. Like, let's get this thing done. It looks like it's impossible. Anyway, I feel like we're out of time.
Yeah.
Time
feel
isn't infinite.
So has this been?
I feel like this has been an Agile thing. I have been Matt Beam.
I have been Mike Markey.
And I'm still Jeff Singleton.
And we will see you next time.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
See ya.